Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Living Traditions Homestead. Today I have some work to do in the garden. I thought I would kind of give you guys a tour and just show you some of the maintenance things that I'm going to be working on today in the garden. Today's going to be hot. You know, a lot of the country is in a heat wave, but for us it seems like summer is just here. August seems to be here in June, and in our little part of the country, in the Ozarks of Missouri, it looks like for at least the next 10 days, we're pretty much going to be in the 90s. What that means is work that's outside is completed in the morning and in the evening. And then during the hottest part of the day, we find things that need to be done inside the house. So today is no different. I think today the high is maybe 91 or 92. It's actually one of the coolest parts of the week coming up. And so I'm taking advantage of the morning. I hope you enjoy our time in the garden this morning. Let's get started. Now, the main thing that I'm going to be doing today while I walk around and show you how well all the plants are doing is weeding. We do have this wonderful weed fabric all over this garden, which takes care of like 99% of the weeds. Early on in the year, while the plants are still small, there is some weeding to do in the holes that we've burned in the weed fabric to plant our plants. And then once the plants get big enough, they pretty much shade out the rest of the weeds. So I really haven't done basically the once a season weeding yet. And so I'm going to be working on that today. One of the things I wanted to show you guys is just how well these marigolds are doing. I planted a whole row of these right at the beginning of the garden here. Last year we used this row for tomatoes, but we don't need as many tomatoes this year. And when I planted these, I showed you guys on video that they were really long and lanky. And what I did was really cut the plant hard. Like I cut it back really hard, almost in half, maybe more. And that was to encourage them to get bushy rather than long and lanky. And I had a couple of comments on that video that people didn't know that you could do that. And so I wanted to show you the results of doing that. They are just doing exactly what I had hoped they would do. They're just getting nice and big and bushy rather than really tall and lanky. This is also an example of some weeds kind of poking out. In the weed fabric there you can see, I would call this crabgrass. I don't really know exactly what this is, but this is pretty much the majority of the weeding that needs to happen today. And because I watered last night, these should come up really easily. I think my love for gardening and for flowers was originally inspired by my mother. My mother always had beautiful flowers. She still has beautiful flowers to this day. We had a few vegetables in a garden, maybe every year, every other year, but really her forte and her love was in flowers. So I think my original love for gardening was from my mother. Now, when I was little and I would help her plant flowers, many of them were annual flowers. When I was little, she would say to pinch off all of the flowers after you planted them, after you transplanted them. And that about killed me because the flowers were the most beautiful part. But what she told me is if you remove the flowers when you're transplanting them, then the little plants will concentrate on growing their roots, which it definitely did. She always had beautiful flowers. Now that I've kind of been exploring gardening on my own, I take it one step further. I don't just remove the flowers, I kind of cut most of the annuals back to give them that time, number one, to really establish a good root structure, but also to encourage them to branch out and get nice and bushy and full. And I love that. It kind of kills the heart at first, but the end result is so satisfying and gorgeous. Okay, next up I'm going to be doing some work on these tomatoes. We have one full row of tomatoes here, and we have half of a row of tomatoes here. In this row there are 28 tomato plants. 14 of them are slicers, 14 of them are sauce tomatoes. The slicers are Jetstar, which is our favorite, and the sauce tomatoes are Opulka and Salvatierra Select. The tomatoes over here are actually the exact same varieties, only 14 of them, and we're doing a different we're growing them differently. We're going to be suckering all of these tomatoes, but leaving these tomatoes get large and bushy and stay natural. There are a couple things I'm going to be doing with the tomatoes. The first one is weeding underneath them like I was doing for the marigolds, but also as I'm finding branches that are trying to kind of pull away from this fencing here, I'm going to be using these tomato clips to attach them to the fencing. Now these tomato clips are what we've been using for the last couple of years. They do an okay job, but they're really kind of annoying. We're going to use them again this year and really until our supply runs out. We have 2 bags of these left. I don't know how many are in there, probably a gazillion. But once we run out of these, we're going to find something else to use. Probably those white kind of clips that do this around your tomato plants. These are really only good for 1 year. The second year, they're kind of brittle from the heat and from the sun, but we're going to use up what we have before we move on to something else. So those are really the 2 things I'm going to be working on these tomatoes. Oh, and as I find leaves that are on the ground here, I'm going to clip those off. Leaves that are touching the ground or close to the ground are at risk of getting disease splashed up on them from the ground when it rains, so I'm going to be working on that too. So quite a few things to be working on with the tomatoes. I do want to show you really how great they're doing. Now these are the Jetstar tomatoes, and I just want to show you like how thick these stems are. In the middle of the plant, these stems and branches are just so thick and beautiful and healthy. Now we really do expect these plants to look fantastic this year, all of the plants in the garden, mainly because we are gardening on virgin ground. So all of the nutrients that have been in this previous hayfield are still in all the nutrients are still in the ground. And so we anticipate that all of the plants are going to look fantastic. It is now our responsibility to continue putting nutrients back into the soil, and that's something that we need to take seriously if we're going to continue gardening and growing this space. We need to take care of the soil. I hope to be sharing more about how we're going to be doing that in the seasons to come. So we're looking forward to learning more about that and sharing it with you. So I'm going to just keep working my way down to the end. I don't know if you saw that I'm sitting on a little hunting cushion, mainly because it's so wet right now. The dew point is really high right now, which means that we get heavy dew overnight, and I don't really want a wet butt. Now I'm looking for branches that need to be connected to the fence. You guys, I can't even tell you how amazing these tomato plants are here. They're so strong. These are not flimsy at all. Right now, I don't feel like I need to attach this because they're just doing so well. They're so strong. One thing I want to share with you is that When it started heating up, I was worried that the blossoms on the tomato plants, it would be too hot for them to set fruit, because there are certain conditions where the pollen will go sterile and then you won't produce any fruit on your tomato plants. So I did some more research about that and I was a little bit relieved. What I found out was that there are two conditions that need to be met in order for your tomato flowers not to be able to pollinate, basically for the pollen to go sterile and for them not to be able to produce fruit. The first thing is the temperatures, the daytime temperatures need to be over 85. Ours have definitely been over 85, but the low temperatures need to be 75 or above. So there have been a couple evenings where we've been kind of teetering, 74 degrees as the low, but most nights we're below 75. So I think that the tomato plants are going to be okay and they're going to set fruit. So we're hoping for the best. Another thing that I'm very encouraged about this year is that so far I'm not seeing any aphids, no white flies. It's kind of too early to tell for the armyworms and the tomato hornworms. They kind of come later in the season, but we will keep an eye out for those pesky buggers because they are stealthy. We're going to keep our eye out. Now we're getting over to the paste tomatoes or the sauce tomatoes. These are Salvatierra Select, and they have some branches that need to be supported before they get much bigger. So I'm going to be using my tomato clips and just clip them up to this fence here, support them. I'm going to do that with the rest of these sauce tomato plants. This here is a branch that needs to be fastened or tied back to the fence. I'm just using one of those tomato clips, taking it to the fence and clipping it around the fence there. Just like that. You can see that the jet stars are producing some beautiful fruit. That is a nice size. There's my hand for perspective there. And then over here, right next door, the Salvatierra Select are starting. I have a couple that are really big, but some nice clusters starting here, so I'm really encouraged. Oh, look what I just found. A baby tomato hornworm. Looks like it's time to get out the BT. Now, BT is an organic form of pesticide that works specifically on caterpillars. It's actually a bacteria that when it's sprayed on your plants, the caterpillars will, munch on the leaves and digest that or ingest that. And the bacteria kills the caterpillars. So it's an easy and effective way to combat the armyworms and the tomato hornworms that get on your plants and destroy them. So within the next day or two, we'll probably be spraying the tomato plants and the other plants that are affected by those types of creepy crawlies so that we can get a handle and an early start on protecting our plants. I found another one of those buggers. I want to show you signs to look for the tomato hornworm. You see here? That black stuff is tomato hornworm poop. So you know that there is one around and it's just a matter of trying to find it. And they're so good at camouflaging that oftentimes it is so hard to find them, but I found it. Do you see it? Do you see it now? That tiny little guy. We're gonna take care of him. I'm not squeamish about many things, but I do not touch them. They freak me out. We're gonna go feed that to the chickens, although our chickens don't often like them. Maybe I'll just squish them with my foot. Well, all of the tomatoes are done. Now I'm actually moving on to our pepper row here. We have a half of a row of peppers this year. I think it's about 14 plants. We grew so many peppers last year that I still have some in the freezer, and I have a bunch that I freeze dried. So this year we're just doing a smaller amount of peppers. So I don't have a whole lot to do on this half of the row except pick the weeds that are around the plant, but I do want to show you how well they're growing. This is another one of the plants that I pruned back. I cut way back when I put them into the ground, and I did that so that they wouldn't grow tall and lanky, long and lanky. I did it to encourage the side branches to grow out, and so that the pepper plant becomes bushy and will ultimately produce more peppers. Let me take you closer so you can see how well they're doing. You can see how nice and bushy these pepper plants have become. Now, when I originally cut them back, I cut them back at about this point. I know it's probably hard to see in there, but these pepper plants have really grown. They probably tripled in size, and they have a lot of really nice bushy branches. We have a lot of blossoms coming on all of the plants. Lots of blossoms. I know I heard from a couple of concerned people about cutting them back, and they have a shorter growing season, and so cutting the pepper plants back, they felt stunted the growth of their pepper plants. Here in the Missouri Ozarks, we have such a long growing season. We will be growing peppers well into October until our first frost, so I have no fear at all cutting these back. They'll have plenty of time to grow here and produce a lot of peppers. On to the green beans. Now really, I'm just weeding these green beans. That's all I'm doing here today. Nothing super special or exciting. What is exciting though is how big these guys have gotten since the last garden tour we did. I looked back on our videos and I saw that our last garden tour was 2 weeks ago. So if you go back and look at the height or how small a lot of our plants are and compare that today, it's really amazing. It's been a huge blessing. You know, I just want to tell you that every time I come into this garden, I pray for God to bless this garden and to watch over it. And you know what? I'm not going to be sorry about that. I feel like this is a blessing from God. The gifts that He's given me to help raise all of these and harvest and preserve it is a gift from God. And I am so thankful at how beautiful all of these plants are. In 2 weeks, these guys have just exploded, you guys. I am seeing the beginnings of the creation of blossoms, which then the beans will come after that. It's gorgeous. I love them. These are contender beans, green beans, which we will can either as dilly beans or we'll pressure can them to use throughout the year. We might even do some freeze drying. But my hope is a lot of dilly beans and more just canned beans for our family because we love them. Okay, the green beans look so much better. On to the next row. This row is edamame. Edamame are soybeans. And I've got quite a few things to say about this as a result of some questions and comments that we've had in previous videos. So Kevin and I have made a point of saying that the seed that we have grown here for the soybeans is non-GMO. And we've said that on purpose because there's a misconception that every soybean out there is a GMO soybean. And so we've specifically said that these are non-GMO soybeans. But even though we've said that, we know that really only big commercial farmers who grow soybeans for basically soybean oil, those are really the only people who have access to the GMO soybean seeds. They have to sign a contract with the soybean companies to grow the GMO soybeans. So we know that, and now if you didn't know that, you know that. So if you buy soybeans or edamame seeds from, you know, Baker Creek or Burpee or any other seed company, rest assured that those are not GMO soybeans. The other comment that we've been getting is that even though we don't consume much soy, in fact, these soybeans are the only things that we consume that are soy in our diet because we don't want to consume GMO products, and because soybeans are said, if you look into it a little bit, there is some controversy. It is said that soybeans are a natural form of estrogen, and so we shouldn't be consuming it because it can affect our bodies, it can affect our health, our daughters, fertility, those kinds of things. So I just want to let you know that we are aware of that. You can do your own research if you feel that way and make a decision for you and your family, but we are growing edamame to be eaten steamed, eat the beans steamed, as a once in a while snack over the course of the next maybe even year or two. So we do enjoy it. It's the only form of soy that we consume. We're very intentional about not over consuming soybeans or soy, and so that's my soapbox about soybeans. So these guys need to be weeded too, same as the green beans. I'm just gonna get started. It's starting to get hot. I gotta get moving. Well, you guys, I finished the row of soybeans here, and by that time it was lunch. It was getting really hot, and it was time for me to go in for the afternoon. There was also some road construction. The guys out there were starting to make a lot of noise, so I decided it was time for me to quit until this evening. So maybe you can tell, maybe not, but the sun has changed position considerably. This morning Kevin was mowing, that's why you didn't see him out here, and this afternoon he is actually putting away our hay. Our hay has been cut and baled by the wonderful man who does that for us. He does our hay on the halves, so we get half and he gets half, and it is a wonderful relationship and a really awesome deal. So I'm back into the garden. The other thing I want to say is I did something really dumb, and I pretty much wore shorts out here for the first time this morning, and I was out here for 4 hours. And that wasn't very smart. So my legs are sunburned, and they hurt too much to wear jeans. So I'm wearing cotton pants, which I don't normally do on videos, but you guys, you'll be understanding, right? So it's time to finish up the garden. I don't have a whole lot to do. I've got 1, 2, 3 rows basically to finish, and a couple other things that I want to do before evening time. So let's get started. Next up in this row, this is okra. These are baby okra plants. And at the other end of this row, which you can't see right now, are cucumbers. There are 2 things that I need to do here with the okra. The first thing is pull weeds, just as the name of the game today. And the second thing is a couple of these spots have 2 okras per hole in the weed fabric, and I just need 1. These plants here get so humongous they end up being the size of trees, so I only need 1 per hole. So I'm going to be removing the one that looks the worst and keeping the one that looks the best, and also, like I said, I'm going to be doing some weeding here. Now, just as a reminder, we plant Clemson spineless okra. There's the one that is going to go, This is the one that is left. What I'm seeing here is that I should have done this earlier. This one over here has only had one in the planting hole the entire time, and the stem of it is much thicker, almost twice as thick as this one over here, which has been fighting for space with that second okra plant. So, word to the wise, if you do this, get rid of one of them sooner rather than later. Learn from our mistakes. Our cucumber plants are doing really well. We had to replant some of the seeds at least one time because they didn't germinate. This plant here was one of the first of the seeds to germinate, and you can see really just how thick their stems are here, and I'm really excited about that. I think these look fantastic. Any day now they're gonna start to run up this cattle panel and start producing blossoms. They're doing really well. This variety is Marketmore. We have been growing this every year for probably 6 years now, and we love it. The cantaloupes are next. They're looking really good. There's a couple weeds in there that I need to get. I don't remember the variety of cantaloupe that we're growing this year, but we're excited for them. They're all looking really nice. And next up are the watermelon. They're doing really well, starting to sprawl. We have sweet Dakota rose here, and on the end there we have strawberry watermelon, which is our favorite. They're all looking really well. All of these except for one were plant starts that we started from seed that we collected from last year. The plant start that we put here died, so this one we had to plant from seed, and it's doing fine too, but you can see the difference in size. These guys were from seed, these guys were from transplants. So a couple weeds here and we're done with the watermelon and the cantaloupe. This row here is our winter squash. We're doing half spaghetti squash and half Canadian crookneck squash, which is a type of butternut squash. The plants are gorgeous, man. They are just taking off. They're nice and big. And I'll be honest, I think that the spaghetti squash plants are ahead of the Canada crookneck plants. Not a whole lot to do here either. It looks like their vines are starting to spread out. This year we've decided not to trellis these and just let them go kind of bonkers on the ground. So the only maintenance I need to do today is weeding. Almost done, just a couple plants to go and we'll be done weeding for the day. Last up in the garden is our corn. Now this year we're not planting sweet corn, we're planting a dent corn called Danny corn from our friends at Deep South Homestead. Dent corn is a dry corn that you use to make cornmeal, corn flour, grits. You can also use it as animal feed. This is the first year we're trying it and we're really excited to try it out. It's approaching the time where we are going to need to fertilize this and hill it up. And after we're done with that, we will be putting 3-foot weed fabric in between the rows to help with weed suppression. Well, I am almost done for the day. Everything has been weeded, the tomatoes have been tied up, the okra have been thinned out. While I was working, I noticed one problem. It's really one problem, but it's affecting 2 rows, and that is a problem with our irrigation lines. There were several irrigation lines that Kevin and I realized after we installed the irrigation system. Some of the lines were cracked and were causing geysers and they weren't working effectively, so we replaced a couple of those. And it looks like in 2 of the rows, well, one of them we didn't staple back down into place, so it's a little bit too far away from one of the rows to water effectively, and so those plants aren't getting the water that they need. The other one we just simply put back kind of in the wrong spot, and so I need to rework those. So I'm just going to quickly redo those, and then the watering will be set. This one here too. There, that is fixed. I'm super pleased with that. Now these tomatoes and these peppers will get the adequate amount of water that they need. One final thing that I need to do in the garden before I go home. Samantha's actually cooking dinner for us, and so hopefully I can get Kevin out of the hayfield and we can go home and eat dinner before I come back for chores again. So the last thing is to clean up. And one of the most awesome things about this woven weed fabric is how easy it cleans up. Can't wait to show you. Well, the garden is back to looking great. It's been a good day's work. It's been long and hot and I'm sweaty and I'm ready for dinner and I need a drink of water. So you guys, hey, thanks so much for spending some time with me today in the garden, whipping it back into shape. It was a good time. It was good work to be done. Hey, you guys, if you're enjoying our channel, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. And really, if you're loving our videos, the best way that you can help us is to share our videos on your social media. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.